Hi, I am Daniel Coleman. This is my final project for Biotech. Um, a major problem in the world is starvation and hunger. The lack of food that people can have in the world, especially third world countries, it's difficult for them to get it. It's difficult for first world countries to go out and deliver it to them. And that's mainly because, well, food does have expiration dates typically. And so just delivering mass food over to third world countries overseas is oftentimes difficult and thus not really cared for as people look for solutions. And what I find to be what would be a great solution would be bees and honey. Honey being the main factor in this. Um, why I think that is because, well, honey um, has all the nutrients needed for survival. In theory, if you ate enough honey, you'd have all the nutrients to go on day to day for the rest of your life. And so, honey is something that doesn't need to be manufactured. So, if that is something that we could deliver, or that third world countries could start setting up on their own, of getting bees to produce for them, then that could be a huge plus in solving this starvation problem and hunger problem across the world. Now, a couple of questions that, of course, come up, and some common things that people have talked about is how bees have been on like the decline. It's been recently in the U.S., the United States. There's been a massive decline in them, and in Europe about the populations. And so I did wonder to myself, like, are bees going to survive then as a species? Because there's been like wonder about that, and it's not the great easiest to find info about bees, but I do want to show overall what the bee production of beehives in the world is so far. This is on a world scale, if you could see here. Now, this being back in the 1960s, and here we have up to 2017 is how recent this graph was. The number of beehives has actually climbed slowly over time. And this is on the world scale, right? So, right now, it's this being like 60 million, oh gosh, 60 million, 80 million, 100 million. So we're really approaching that 100 million line fairly soon across the world. So bees honestly are not dying as a species very soon. Now the problem is that in the United States and in Europe, that's where we've been seeing massive declines. And there's been multiple subjects to that where you're overworking hives, taking more of the honey that they need for survival, and pesticides have also been into those problems. But so aside from those, though, bees actually are sustainable and can survive throughout. There are survivable species, as we can see throughout the world, if we just solve, even if they're not needed to be placed in the U.S. or in Europe, there's plenty of other places that can be. Now, essentially, what would happen is in kind of phase one of the process, we set up massive hive areas to produce bees and produce honey with the sole purpose of, giving them to poorer countries and whatnot, helping them try to survive on this newer substance that many third world countries don't typically think about, right? And so you can set up massive plantations for hives to work them, and as long as you keep giving them a sustainable amount, not treating plants with pesticides, bees can survive just fine. And that would be essentially the main part of this so far, is making up that honey so it can be delivered to other countries. Now, one other question to be said is, can bees survive in multiple climates? Well, the answer is, yes, and obviously not every climate, so no, but not everything. But bees can survive in tropical climates fairly well, and you have different species of bees as well, including Africanized bees, uh, killer bees, sometimes people call, which actually even do fairly well in desert environments, or less rainfall environments at least. And African bees can also be used to Africanized bees can also be used to create honey, just because they're actually very similar to what we think of as the honeybee. The only main thing is that Africanized bees are more aggressive, and if you've pissed a couple of them off, you know, typical honeybees will just have, part of maybe a few bees or part of the hive coming after you, whereas with Africanized bees, it'd be the whole hive coming after you. That's the main problem with them there, but they can still easily make honey, and you can harvest that. People do harvest it, so it certainly is possible. Now, transporting this honey to third world countries, you could think of as a problem, but really, I mean, it's not. Honey is one of those things where it's like, like technically it spoils after so long, but like that's if it has so many impurities, it like maybe after a year or so. But really, like honey, like you set it down, it does like harden into a crystallized state, but that's almost easier for transporting. Is in this crystallized state, then it's more of a solid, and it's much more movable, and it doesn't really matter what temperature necessarily you have kept honey at, because it still contains nutrients that can be delivered to those people in need. Now, the main thing that would be important that pertains to this class of bees is that, they can be genetically modified. And there's been talk of modifying bees so that they can sustain in different climates or against pesticides. And there's been some work started on that. Not much research to be told there, but now with genetically modifying bees and then allowing them to be able to be in those other countries, it would be a huge plus for hunger. And if we can cause them, oh my gosh, yes, if we can, as the genetic modification process goes forward, there's the possibility of allowing them to create more honey in their lifespans, and also being able to live longer. And the main thing is survive pesticide use. So far as what they're anticipating doing is, pulling a protein from the pesticide chemical and implementing it into the bee so that the bee can develop some part of an immunity, and that way it can survive those pesticides. Is a common, that's the main thing that they're working on right now, which would be good. But end goal, as I was talking about before, is it kind of goes with the saying: you give a man a fish, he eats for a day. You teach a man to fish, and he eats for a lifetime. And so with these people, we starting out, we would, hopefully just work off trade deals perhaps with honey, or just, donate honey to lesser countries in need. But in the end, we want to get them to be able to work with bees and become beekeepers themselves, so that this way they will be able to harvest their own honey and be able to feed their families and keep their kids and families healthy. And this way, they'll be able to survive. And yeah, there's been other talk of genetically modifying honey in its crystallized form as well. So that way, honey already has been, you can find diluted honey before, or with different nutrients as well. But what we could do is, with different bees in different climates, they'll be able to gather up certain nutrients of wherever they are, because obviously it can also depend on pollen of different plants. But with all this in mind, they're allowed to gather up everything, and oh my gosh, this way they're able to save these starving countries. My bad. But yes, so that is kind of my theory for biotech. Is it would be like per se genetically modifying these bees, and perhaps genetically modifying the honey, to just be able to add more nutrients to it per se. Yes, thank you.